other thing is the paper. The other major thing is the paper. We talked about discussions, all or nothing. I will correct it in terms of APA format. Again, that'll help you with the paper, hopefully. It's kind of free of charge with the discussion items. It won't be free of charge here. There is, again, a video clip that will go over APA format more effectively. I'm just going to put this one off to the side. I don't need it anymore. So you can look that over for APA format. But with the paper is kind of going off in a slightly different direction. Usually, in a lot of my classes, the paper and the presentation are pretty much, they can piggyback on each other because they're kind of replications of what I'm asking for in terms of the presentation. In this situation, it's a little different. The paper, I want you to come up with your own personality theory, basically. After you've read some of these theorists, how would you come at it if you were a personality theorist? How would you describe the process? And in the paper, you have an example of a paper. You can use that as a template. You have an example on Blackboard. You can use it as a template. But you'll want to do a few things on this paper. You want to talk about the image of human nature. And in this section, there are 3 areas to cover. One, you want to talk about nature versus nurture. So does genetics play the greater role in personality development? Does nurture play the greatest role? Is it do you see it as kind of split between the two, kind of 50-50? I mean, what's your input there in terms of nature versus nurture? And again, cite the literature. And the second thing you'll want to talk about is free will versus what we call determinism. Are our decisions in life dictated by the environment, by genetics, by whatever? Or do we have complete free will in this process? Is it on some sort of continuum, where both play a role, but one may play the stronger role? Again, that's for you to explore and to discuss. And again, cite your references there. And finally, the past versus the present. What do you think plays the larger role in terms of personality development? What's happened to us in our developmental years, or the present? Is it a continuous process? Both play equally strong roles in the process. It's up to you. This is your paper. This is how you see it. Just back things up with some of the literature out there. The other thing I want you to talk about are motivating forces. And this is where you can kind of get real creative. You can kind of say to yourself, what motivates us to do anything in life? Is it greed? Is it a desire for attention? Is it God? What drives us? Is it the need to survive? So this is your opportunity to get real creative and maybe even come up with catchy titles. In my paper, I talk about physical motivations, the drive for survival, food, drink, nourishment in and of itself, shelter, that sort of thing. Then I talk about socio-emotional forces, the need to be accepted, the need to have emotional attachments. Those are driving forces, and that dictates some of our behavior. I talk about cognitive motivations, things that, we're curious about the world, and so that motivates us to do some things that we wouldn't choose to do otherwise, like maybe go to graduate school and get a graduate degree, that sort of thing. And spiritual motivations, I talk about that as well. So you can choose similar themes, or just based on your own life experience, come up with a whole different list of of driving forces. It's up to you. Again, it's your paper. Then talk a little bit about functional and dysfunctional personality styles. And in my paper, I've talked about what I call egocentric personality style, where you're really self-focused. I talk about homeostatic and altruistic personality style. Homeostatic is kind of a equilibrium. You're at an equilibrium process or stage where you're balanced, in a sense, balanced with life, environmental forces, inner needs, intrapersonal. There's a balance there. And altruistic, you're kind of giving, always giving, which can have its own set of consequences if you give too much. And not take care of yourself in the process. So that's what I came up with when I did my paper, and a little summary at the end. And the only thing I'll mention about that is when you do the summary, don't talk about something you haven't talked about in your paper. Your summary should be a summary. It should basically highlight what you've discussed in your paper. This is not the time to introduce new material. So summary, only what you've covered, just the highlights. It can be a paragraph at most. Okay, so that's the introduction. At this point, I'll stop, and then in a few minutes, we'll get with our first lecture.